Hey everyone, happy Monday. This is a look at the US weather outlook for this week and a glance into next week, kind of looking at weather intelligence, how I look at things of what's happening now, what's happening or expected to happen in the short term, medium term, and long term. Right now, the big story is a significant nor'easter across the Northeast, producing significant winter conditions across parts of the Northeast, including New York City, seeing significant snowfall amounts and wind as well. And it's really cool to see when we look at the GOES satellite visible imagery. We can see this well-defined area of low pressure. It has this comma head structure, indication of a very mature, strong cyclone. There's a lot of moisture that's getting wrapped up. It's kind of converging, and then it's getting kind of sheared in this convergence and strong. Uh, Temperature gradient environment. It produces very strong snowfall rates within a very narrow band. This is really what's set up across parts of New Jersey, New York, and surrounding areas. Significant cold front, too, is sort of out ahead of the storm now, and you can see some convection out over the Atlantic. This extends all the way down into parts of the Gulf. As well, we could see the significant what we call cloud streaks. So as this colder air moves across warmer ocean water, we see a lot of this cloud structure. I was really cool to look at visible satellite. We can see remnants of recent snowfall across parts of Nebraska, Iowa, and Wisconsin. And then we see more clouds associated with precipitation across the western U.S., which I'll get into. And it's hard to see, but there's actually a fairly noticeable fire down across South Florida. Some fire weather concerns down there. Yes, Florida does have wildfire concerns. There is a lot of vegetation there that can burn. They do get dry at times. The good news is it looks like there is some rain in the forecast. You can see this smoke plume here, evident in visible satellite. If we look at shortwave radiation, which helps us look at the temperature of clouds or whatever it's seeing. In this case, it's seeing down to the fire. We can see this pretty large wildfire ongoing. And actually, I'll take a look too real quick. Watch Duty is a really great situational awareness tool. I use it a lot. Leverages a lot of different spotters and folks who look at reports, different sources of data, including traffic, wildfire camera, satellite data, ground truth to kind of confirm what's going on. We can see this is the national fire here that we saw on satellite, last estimated at 5,000 acres. So really great tool there. If we look at the current watches and warnings across the U.S., the National Weather Service Weather and Hazards Viewer, another great tool. I'm showing the observed wind gusts for today and have a filter on that, anything over 40 miles per hour. We can see some pretty significant wind gusts accompanying that snow, so creating pretty significant impacts, not only in terms of the snow loading from the snow, which has been kind of on the heavier side, a lower density, somewhat heavier snow. So that combined with wind certainly is going to create travel issues, some issues with stress on trees, vegetation, and then subsequent power outage issues across the Northeast. We can see the strongest winds really are along the coast, less friction over the water, so easier for stronger winds to be observed along the coastlines there. And then also, you may have noticed, seeing some stronger, we have seen some stronger wind gusts above 30 miles per hour across parts of Florida where we have a red flag warning. And you'll notice a slew of red flag warnings, fire weather watches, high wind watches, and warnings across the central portions of the U.S. In advance of the next system. So if we sort of jump in, first I'll cover the fire weather aspect before we kind of evolve through the forecast. So I'm stepping ahead a little bit here, but as we look at today, the fire weather outlooks on the daily basis come from the Storm Prediction Center. So we see elevated fire weather concerns across parts of the Texas Panhandle surrounding areas, and then elevated to critical across much of the state of Florida. As sort of those winds die down, that becomes less of a concern tomorrow. As a storm system and jet stream develops across the Rocky Mountains, we're going to see some stronger winds develop on the lee of the Rockies, especially the southern half of Colorado into New Mexico, West Texas. A lot of areas that we've been seeing pretty significant fire weather concerns. Remains very dry. Fuels are very dry and receptive to burning very quickly. Winds are only going to exacerbate that with warm and dry conditions. And it looks like those are expected to linger into Wednesday, potentially Thursday as well. As we look, is a little bit further out, so we've kind of got a sense of what's going on the next few days. We can also see this sort of aligns with the February outlook from the Predictive Services, the National Interagency Fire Center. Does these multi-monthly outlooks, giving a sense of where there's normal, above, or below normal significant wildfire potential. We see that a lot of the Southeast, a lot of the South Central and Central U.S. have been in this above average significant wildfire potential for a while, really just owing to very dry conditions. And we see that is expected to continue as we head into March. relief for parts of the Central Plains as things green up a bit into April, remaining a little bit more prone to significant wildfires for portions of the Southeast where we remain fairly dry. So, really great outlook to kind of look at what's expected this week, what is the potential in the coming months, just based upon where conditions are tracking right as we maybe kind of just take a quick look. Another really beneficial tool to kind of look at what does the forecast look like for the next 3 to 7 days. This can highlight some major potential issues at the National Weather Service that NOAA is seeing. There's a couple things highlighted, and we'll get more into this, but high winds is highlighted as we head into Thursday and Friday across really, again, the lee of a lot of the Rocky Mountain range across the northern half. And then we'll have maybe not as strong of winds across the southern half of the Rockies, but fire weather concerns will exist there as well, as I mentioned, into Wednesday and Thursday. Heavy rain potential, slight risk of heavy rain Thursday and Friday across parts of Tennessee and surrounding areas. We'll talk about that a little bit more with subsequent storm systems. So again, one thing I really like to look at, help diagnose this, is to look at a lot of storm systems are tied to what's going on at mid levels of the atmosphere, especially shortwave pieces of energy, where those are located within specific shortwaves, within broader troughs. It's really helpful to kind of diagnose what's going on. We see reflection of this significant nor'easter is tied to this significant troughs, kind of a series of troughs that have sort of fused together, let's say, creating very significant dynamic energy to create this strong area below pressure. That's going to continue to lift out to the east, so continued snow winding down across the northeast, gusty winds slowly subsiding. As we sort of look at the evolution into tomorrow and Wednesday, we see storm system number 2. It's in part coming onshore across the Pacific Northwest right now. This is sort of an Alberta Clipper type system, very fast moving, not a lot of moisture to work with, but enough cold air that's going to produce a swath of snow from the North Plains, Midwest, Great Lakes into the Northeast Tuesday and into Wednesday. As that happens, we have system number 3 coming into the Pacific Northwest, kind of a chain of storm systems moving across the Western U.S. And that's going to bring a lot of snowfall, especially for portions. It's the higher elevations of the Cascades, Sawtooth, Bitterroot Mountains, and Tetons are going to do pretty well over the next few days. This series of system measuring snowfall in feet. So much needed snowfall for portions of the northern Rockies and Northwest. Again, the snowfall line is going to be rising. It's going to be pretty high. So the Cascades aren't really going to get a lot of snow with us. It's actually more rain, aside from maybe some of the passes and peaks of the Cascades. That, along with rainfall, is going to create some runoff and flooding potential across parts of the western U.S. And actually, I didn't show this, but we do have across northern California and southern Oregon, on the coastal area, we have a flood watch, namely owing to this warmer atmospheric river that's going to be setting up. And as we look at that sort of system number 3, as that evolves through the week, as we head into Wednesday to Thursday, as I mentioned, really what's going on here is these storm systems are helping to really amplify the flow. So that's why we're seeing really strong winds across the lee of the Rockies, not only tomorrow, but then again Thursday and Friday. And as we see here, this is sort of system number 3. As this digs in, it's going to be able to tap into some moisture. There's this kind of reestablishes this cold front here, and that's going to create an area of heavier precipitation. I don't think we're going to see severe weather. It's slightly possible, but not expected right now. But heavy rain potential with this as we head Thursday into Friday, and then the next storm system is kind of further north, coming into early next week. And it looks like things stay fairly active next week. We're seeing some potential for some cutoff lows developing. We're seeing this both from the GFS within the European. One thing I want to call out, as we start looking farther into the forecast, we really take it with a grain of salt. We don't look at this forecast and say, oh, there's a shortwave trough that's going to be cutting off and moving into California. Could that bring flooding concerns? Could that bring Santa Ana wind event? We really just don't know that. What we know is that between the GFS and the European, and some of their ensemble solutions, that they are showing the tendency for a stronger shortwave trough to potentially close off. That could bring some precipitation to the desert Southwest. It could bring some enhanced fire weather conditions to the southern plains. And as that kicks out, as that works with moisture, could have some severe weather potential for the South Plains. As it lifts up, it could have some precipitation, winter precipitation for central northeastern portions of the U.S. So it looks like what we can take away from that is a meteorological perspective, as things remain active. as we go into next week. Likely remaining windy for areas that have remained windy across much of the lee of the Rockies, with precipitation potential, wintry precipitation. As expected, as we're going into early spring now, this isn't uncommon to see sort of this active pattern of storm systems pretty far south. As we look at what is the impact in terms of winter conditions, this is looking at what is the probability of moderate impacts in terms of snowfall, snow loading, wind and or icing. The main impacts again are going to be primarily in the mountains. I called out some of those mountain ranges that are going to do pretty well with this storm cycle. um, Really, snowfall that's falling both Tuesday to Wednesday and then again later in the week. Really only minor impacts expected, nothing compared to the conditions we've seen in the last 24 hours across the Northeast, and then potentially more minor to moderate conditions as we head into early next week as the next storm system comes into play. And as we look at this is another really great tool from NOAA looking at leveraging some probabilistic information. You can see here's sort of that first storm system number 2, that Alberta Clipper, bringing pretty high probabilities of more than 3 inches of snowfall across the northern Great Lakes into the Northeast. Still seeing some snow. Heavier amounts further inland, lake effect belt are going to get some pretty good snow to that. And then another round again Thursday and Friday with that heavier rain across the Tennessee River Valley. And then we'll look at more potential for snow across the Midwest into the Northeast early next week. Just wanted to call out too, we like to talk about atmospheric rivers. We look at the vapor transport, how much moisture, water vapor is being transported from low level winds. One thing I wanted to call out for the Western US, atmospheric rivers are a pretty significant portion of the winter precipitation that happens. But that's not to say that we don't see similar setups or strong transport of moisture vapor across the rest of the world, even across a lot of the U.S. As we see with this current nor'easter, there is very long and then strong area of integrated vapor transport. This is part of why we've seen such impressive precipitation and snowfall totals. A lot of moisture being wrapped up into the storm and then converged into the northern sector of the storm. There's colder air. And, just wanted to call out that we do see these atmospheric river-like structures in other parts of the U.S., but they're usually more prominent and more responsible for the primary precipitation driver for the Western U.S. That's why we talk about them so much. Out west, they also tend to extend pretty far west across the Pacific at times. So their horizontal expanse can be quite impressive across Western U.S. So as I mentioned, the storm systems coming in, those are sort of just north of this atmospheric river. This sort of sits on the southern periphery of this wave of shortwave troughs moving across the U.S. So overall, as those kind of move through, it continues this sort of this jet of higher vapor moving in that's really going to be aimed towards parts of Oregon and Northern California over the next few days. That slowly winds down then. You can see that that's sort of the response factors, that heavier rain, snow levels getting pretty high again. Interior mountain range is doing pretty well. More rain for a lot of the coastal areas. And then, as I mentioned, that's what's this week as we look into what are the tools that help us look a little bit more in the longer term beyond 1 week. As we look into next week, we're expecting we can really only look at broader signals. We can try to diagnose and look at the models and see what individual storms they show, but we really want to look at ensembles. We want to look at different models, see where there's some consistency. We can look more at averages, and what that shows right now as we look into next week really is above average temperatures for much of the U.S. Very cold across Alaska. And looks like it will remain that way into next week. So highly confident being very cold in Canada, more than likely above average for much of the U.S. next week. Where it'll be more than likely near or below average will be far north portions of the U.S., especially northern plains, potentially in the Northeast. Drier conditions kind of set up for the Western U.S. next week as the sort of polar jet sets up further north, subtropical jet sets up further south. As I mentioned before, with that close-off nature of a shortwave trough that we've been seeing the models for next week, that's likely going to bring some precipitation to the southern plains. Hopefully, we can get this further west into the lee of the Rockies where we really need moisture. That should be good in terms of wildfire potential and getting some moisture and rain on those fuels out there. But it looks like, again, this doesn't mean necessarily a guarantee of a lot of precipitation. It just means that there is a greater chance than not that there will be above average precipitation, especially for portions of Texas, lesser chances for portions of the central and northeastern U.S. And then beyond that, to later next week and the following weekend, pretty similar conditions, chances for above average precipitation expend a little bit further north and east. And the 1 month outlook we have now for March, looking like it's going to remain above average for much of the U.S. The exception being slight chance of below average temperatures are favored for portions of the Pacific Northwest, North Plains, um, and then above average precipitation as well across the Northwest and into the Great Lakes. So that's what we're seeing right now. That's kind of the outlook for this week, a sense of what we could see potentially in the next week and beyond.